Welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk with Bren O'Brien and Tim Rowe from the Straight, brought to you by Inglis and Darley. Today, the rubber hits the road on the New South Wales review of the Racing Act, positives on the balance sheet for Racing Queensland, shuffle-ups at board and executive level across Australia, and why race clubs need to be on guard when it comes to alcohol and gambling this spring. In Breeding and Bloodstock, we talked to Inglis Harry Bailey and bloodstock agent Shane McGrath about the upcoming 2-year-old sales, plus reflect on a stallion making edition of the Golden Rose and what Inglis may do with their Everest lot. Finally, in wagering, what is going on in the US betting market? Entain opts out of its New Zealand Racing Club concept, and how much money do state governments reap from taxes on racing and sports betting? Tim, great to have you on board as always. It's plenty happening on the track at this time of year, but also plenty happening off the track. It's been a very busy week in terms of just news around things like boards and I guess, some might call them paperwork stories, but they're important stories in the context of racing. One of the ones we've sort of been keeping an eye on for a while now is this New South Wales Racing Review, which was announced a few months back. Brad Hazzard to head it up, of course. He sent out his call for submissions this week. And I know that there are a host of stakeholders currently tapping their shoulders of consultants around the country on this one, just to get their point of view across, to make sure by, I think it's November 24, the deadline, that they're across this one. I mean, Tim, from your perspective, what are you expecting out of this review, and how strong do you feel like the stakeholders will be in terms of what they're putting forward to Brad Hazzard over the next few weeks?
Look, the terms of reference are narrow, or narrower than many stakeholders and participants would like, particularly around the funding of racing in New South Wales. And we've spoken about this before of, the regulator, Racing New South Wales, due to race fields fees and so forth for the last sort of 13, 14 years, controlling, more and more a greater proportion of the betting turnover aside from the parimutuel. So, many people would like that funding model to be examined. It's not part of the terms of reference, but I still think stakeholders, whether that be the Australian Turf Club, have publicly said they're going to make submissions, and lots of different people about this is their chance to try and affect change for the positive. And it's not, some might see it as attacking Racing New South Wales or Peter Belandis, but I don't see it that way necessarily, that this is their chance to get in front of the government and possibly trying to make change for the betterment of the industry in New South Wales. And the outcome will be fascinating, how much change or what the recommendations are. And so the terms of reference probably narrowed down what can be achieved out of this.
Yeah, it is an interesting one. And I guess the point around this context, the recommendation did come out of the review, did come out of the Rowe parliamentary inquiry last year that'd be reviewed. And obviously the Act was put into place, I think, in 1996. I don't know where you were in 1996, Tim, but I just started first year uni, so it seems a fair while ago now that the world's changed a fair bit since then, especially in the context of racing and wagering. The PRA concept was born out sort of in that late 90s, early 2000s period, where you would have a governing body across all clubs and in some states across all codes, which would work. Now, these models, there's no perfect model for how this would work, but as you mentioned before, what substantially changed was 2012 when Racing New South Wales won the Racefields legislation high court case. It changed the way that money flowed into the industry, and instead of flowing in through the clubs and enriching the clubs, because of the switch from parimutuel to fixed odds betting, it changed the way that that the funding sort of was worked through, and Racing New South Wales and Racing Victoria and a lot of these bodies got a lot more control over those things. Now, the funding models are different between New South Wales and Victoria, so it's hard to sort of compare like for like. But look, there's a lot of reasonable questions being asked out here, and I know, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of bodies, whether it be the breeding bodies, whether it be race clubs, as you mentioned, whether it be other people who are interested parties, participant groups, all that type of stuff, to ensure that they're getting their say on this one. It was revealed that Brad Hazzard is getting $270,000 for his 9-month consultancy. Good work if you can get it, Tim. Not saying he doesn't deserve it, but that's what these sort of things cost. But it's an interesting one at this stage. Wanted to move on quickly now to Racing Queensland, Tim, and they've got a review pending as well. Of course, we've got that review ongoing at the moment. Matt McGrath, the former ATC chairman, conducting a review, which we believe will be handed down, or it's already been discussed. It'll probably be sort of made public in the next couple of weeks, which will make a raft of recommendations about the change of racing structure in Queensland. It'll be a big moment for Queensland racing. But from Racing Queensland perspective, look, they did post a good number during the week, $34.4 million in terms of their annual report result from 24-25. Obviously, it's been a big period of change in Queensland racing. We've seen Jason Scott depart from a CEO perspective, had a change of government, but the review got kicked in. There's all sorts of other things. I dare say this is probably a bit of positive news, but there's probably got a fair bit of other questions being raised about Queensland racing in the light of this review to come forward, Tim, and it certainly is to watch this space over the next few weeks.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think it is a positive, financial result for racing Queensland. But yeah, there's a lot of challenges with, especially thoroughbred and harness turnover dropping, and pressure on greyhound racing, which is quite profitable for most PRAs. So yeah, there's a lot. Just what recommendations, and if you were, how do I put this? I'd say there is a drain on finances for country racing and things like that, particularly a state as vast as Queensland, but it's also vitally important, and I would strongly advocate for the retention of and support of country racing, given my background and upbringing. But yeah, that's always a challenge for the administration to try and manage that, and the recommendations of Matt McGrath and the committee, what they come up forward and what's adopted, will be fascinating in the next few weeks and going forward beyond that.
Yep. I think Racing Minister Tim Manders used to this week being a busy week in his historical career as an ex-NRL referee, and I think going forward, it will be an interesting time for him as well. And I think the key thing you mentioned there is that, despite the fact obviously they've got some positive results in terms of bottom line numbers or the overall numbers, the question is around about turnover, yes, which, as you mentioned before, dropped significantly for both thoroughbreds and harness, dropped a little bit for greyhound racing. There's a few other questions there. That part of the profit was driven by the fact they had a lot of meetings washed out, and that basically meant payment back to participants dropped off too. So it's an interesting one and a delicate balance. Again, I said a busy week. Changes at board level at Racing Victoria. Tim Rourke promoted to deputy chair, and RV also put an expression of interest out for 2 vacant board seats, with Sharon McCrowan leaving recently, and there's also another empty board seat there. That would be fascinating because 2 board seats are a lot of power for someone, or for to gain around Racing Victoria's board and the way things are run. And there's an opportunity there, and I do know that there's a fair bit of interest in that process, how it will work, who will be on the selection panel, because there will be a selection panel convened by the minister, which will sort of help with that, and it's an interesting one as well. At the VRC board, Pete Murray, the Thoroughbred Breeders Victoria president, is now on the VRC board, which is interesting because they've got a very strong breeders presence on that board, with Vin Cox and Neil Werrett also on the board as well. And plenty going on there. Charlotte Mills, a new appointment at New Zealand Thoroughbred Racing, as in a key racing executive role, but there's a couple other appointments as well too there, Tim. So plenty of things going on there. Of course, we know Charlotte quite well from her time at Moonee Valley. Her contract at Moonee Valley finishes after the Cox Plate, because obviously Moonee Valley's going to hibernation for a while. It's good to see Charlotte remain within the industry because she's a very sharp mind. She's been around for a long time. But it seems to be a major shuffle up at the moment of people moving around and changing seats, Tim.
Sure, on Charlotte, and obviously we were at the back in the punt conference a couple of weeks ago in Melbourne, and Charlotte was emceeing on the opening day, and then there was some NZTR representatives, Matt Balesti and Russell Warwick, the chair, and a few others there, to appear at that conference, but also to conduct interviews the next day. And obviously, I presume Charlotte was one of them. She's going to contract for 12 months, and she does bring a lot of expertise to the industry, and I'm sure she'll make her impact in New Zealand, which again has its challenges, and trying to move forward and probably rationalise, we've used that term a bit, with tracks and different things, and the Entain deal, sort of probably 2.5 years, sort of reaching a 5-year crucial point where the funding model changes slightly. So there's a lot to be done in New Zealand with that new executive that that Matt Balesti's put together.
Yeah, interesting times in New Zealand, plenty of interesting times in Australia as well. Also, just wanted to point, while we just to round off the sort of racing section, Tim, Warwick Bargian this week, which I think is topical. Warwick spoke to a couple of the key regulators in the liquor and gaming space in New South Wales and Victoria over the last few days, just around about the responsibilities on clubs around responsible service of gaming and alcohol and all those types of stuff that they have to do. Now, this has been brought into the spotlight by an issue at the VRC, regarding the son of the VRC chief executive Kylie Rogers, and who was had his membership taken away, and an investigation now is taking place from a liquor perspective of whether underage service was involved and all that type of stuff. It's a delicate and difficult issue for race clubs. They're running a massive venues. Like, if you're talking about 100,000 people at a venue, trying to ensure these things and compliance happens is a very big thing, but the consequences are massive. So it is possible that, and it has been put forward by these bodies, that they could have to run dry race meetings. You can imagine a Melbourne Cup with no beer or no champagne. Like, it's hard to fathom, isn't it, Tim? So and it's the same thing around the wagering stuff as well. There's a lot of sort of questions around that, and compliance is really important. And yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge for race clubs to make sure they get this right. They want to encourage a good convivial atmosphere, but they also want to ensure compliance. And you and I would have seen plenty of times on a racetrack where, the relationship between security or liquor service people and the general public, or the people who are out there having a fun and games or whatever else, can get a bit tense. But they have to do their job. So it's an interesting challenge within racing, just to get that balance right of making sure that the party continues, but making sure it's done in a way which complies with all the relevant laws and processes that go forward. So it's an interesting one for racing, and one that race clubs must confront all the time.
Difficult. I feel for the licensee, which probably, in this case might be Kylie Rogers. I'm not quite sure, but generally it is the CEO. And I know anyone that probably CEO that's worked in racing for a significant amount of time, who is listed as the licensee, would have had encounters with liquor and gaming. It is difficult. You can't control everyone. You are relying on some goodwill, and obviously there's security guards and things like that. But they just do have to be careful. And, in Warwick's story listed example of Griffith races once a year, having enough safe gambling signs around the bookmakers and things like that. Might seem pedantic, but things regulators are cracking down on and making sure we're complying with, and just adds pressure to the role, I guess, and having enough staff to ensure compliance is met as much as possible. You can't control everyone, but I'm sure VRC will be pretty careful from going forward.
With all due respect to the on-course bookmakers, and not mentioning the ones at Griffith per se, but sometimes as country meetings, the stated gambling message might be just trying to work out the percentages they're operating at, Tim, but that's probably another message for another day. On to breeding of bloodstock now, Tim, and we're very much focused on the upcoming run of 2-year-old sales, starting on the Gold Coast next week, of course, Magic Million sale, on to Inglis a week later, and then further on to November for the big ready-to-run sale in New Zealand. What are you expecting out of this sale season, Tim? It's an interesting market. It can be a bit polarised, can't it? And it could be an interesting few weeks in the bloodstock industry.
For sure. And Magic Million's going first. They've gone second the last few years, so that's going to be interesting. It is hard to get, Hong Kong is so pivotal to these markets. Getting trainers or mainly trainers to come down twice in a week, and there's Kaying Rising is a big pulling point at the moment for the Everest and staying on. Inglis, for instance, have had their sale on Tuesday the last few years, and now they've push it back to the Thursday to coincide with the Everest, to make it an attraction to bring owners and trainers down. So that no doubt has put pressure on Magic Millions to try and get those trainers to convince them to come down, fly back for the races, and then fly back down. Won't be easy, and it will be polarising. Yes, David Chester has done his best, as the other companies have, getting the Malaysians and Koreans and those sort of buyers down, and Philippines to participate, but they only play to a certain level. So, it's going to be challenging for the vendors if you don't have the right stock, particularly vetting, so crucial for Hong Kong and Asia and full stop. So, it'll be an interesting market for sure.
And joining us now is Harry Bailey, bloodstock sales manager of Inglis. Harry, we are 2 weeks away from your ready-to-race sale. Talk to us about the build-up. These breeze-up sales are a bit different in the build-up, aren't they? Because of the nature of the breeze, and people get to see that there's people get to see the horses go around and get a bit of a sense of it. I mean, it's a different feel and different build-up than what you'd see for a yearling sale, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Basically, you're getting an opportunity to see what's under the bonnet, essentially. We've got very comprehensive breeze-ups both here in Sydney, Wangaratta and New Zealand. And we've got a catalogue of 224 horses. In our eyes, the best quality of horses ever put together. And to go and see those horses put through their paces, the attitudes, obviously attitude is really important. You've got to have a bomb-proof horse. And you get a very good gauge of how they handle a situation. It's a high-pressure situation. And in many cases, these horses are prepared by very good quality horsemen. And, the horses take it in their stride. So it's a great opportunity for someone looking to buy essentially an up-and-going horse and get a quick return and go to the races, essentially.
And Harry, we've had breeze ups this week in Taupo in New Zealand and Warwick Farm and Wangaratta. What did we learn from them? And intriguing for me was some of the vendors had choices to gallop on or breeze on grass or, poly or synthetic tracks, I guess. What did you take out of what we learnt this week by the surfaces and just more generally with the horses?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, which surface a horse runs on is completely up to the vendor. And, that's probably subject to what facilities that preparer has where they're based. And obviously, especially being in New South Wales, you've had a wet winter. So being able to use the grass wherever they're based is probably being quite restricted. But overall, the majority of our vendors elected to use the grass. I mean, this year, or more recently, we've had really good weather in Sydney. So we had a good 4, we had a good 4 in Wangaratta, and we had a soft 5 in New Zealand. So pretty good surfaces overall. I mean, in New Zealand, they all ran sub 11 and they all ran on the grass. And so, that reads very well in itself. And the horses aren't pushed out in any way whatsoever. They're doing it fairly easily. So it comes down to vendor preferences, but then also buyer preferences. Some buyers prefer to buy horses breezing on one surface or the other. And at the end of the day, most of these horses are racing on grass. So I suppose there is a tendency to shift more towards the grass. But at the end of the day, you can buy good horses from either. And it's just what the horse has been trained on up to that point, basically. But I mean, we obviously had the breeze ups. I mean, some very good times, but a real selection of stallions producing good times. We had a very fast Exceed and Excel, a Toronado, an All Too Hard colt, Pinatubo has been good talk on the 2-year-olds this season, or his first crop of 2-year-olds. So yeah, really exciting. I mean, I was based in the middle at Warwick Farm, and just to see those horses come in and out, I mean, I can say hand on my heart, it is by far and away the best quality physically of horses we've ever put together for this catalogue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we talk about the top line number of the breeds, and we look at it's easy to look at the time and go, oh yeah, well that horse is faster than that horse or whatever else. But it's much more than that. There's a much more other data points and other things that people will rely upon when they're making their decisions out there, Harry, in terms of assessing those horses as they go through the breeze and sort of how they handle it.
Very much so. And we really stress to the vendors, it's not about time. There are plenty of good horses come out of this sale who have not run sub 11, not even 11.5. Natoya is a prime example. She was a great 2-time Group 1 winner, and she ran very slow time. At the end of the day, it's how the horse gallops, what the action is. Does he let down? Has he got a big, nice, loose stride? Obviously, a huge amount of data is going into it as well. Plenty of buyers use stride analysis, heart rate analysis. And then obviously you've got your pedigrees and seeing the horses here when they're here in a couple of weeks' time physically. So yeah, there's plenty of different points to go into. But yeah, time is not everything. You want to just see a horse do it in a nice, relaxed manner, basically a strong piece of work.
And important to get a strong buying bench there in a couple of weeks. Harry, how's that looking? Particularly, we've spoken about this just before you came on, about Hong Kong, the importance of that market. How's, pet trainers and owners will be committing now, booking flights and things like that. How's it looking?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the catalogue in recent years, or the sale in recent years, is producing top-class horses. I mean, you've only got to look at, for example, last year's graduates. They included Rosberg, who was very impressive on debut in the Mackenzie Stakes. He goes to the Danehill Stakes and then hopefully onto the Coolmore. He looks a proper horse. Signature Scent, Son of Kirk, they're 2 good horses from last year, both probably unlucky not to be black type at this stage. And like the Honour Roll, both here in Australia and then obviously overseas, like Ruby Lot in Hong Kong. There's plenty of good horses coming out of this sale. And as a result, certainly domestically, we're getting more and more traction with local buyers. Obviously, traditionally, it's been a very strong sale for Asian-based buyers. And obviously with the Everest happening 2 days after the sale, Kaiying Rising being in Sydney, we're going to have a huge amount of footfall from Asian buyers. James Price, Nicky Wong have been over in Asia for the last 3 weeks and canvassing buyers. And I can say that there's a huge amount of interest in the sale. So from that perspective, yeah, I mean, we are in a good spot. Obviously, there's plenty of water to go under the bridge between now and then, and we'll be working hard to ensure there's essentially no stone is left unturned. But yeah, I mean, it's very exciting. And when you've got a catalogue as good as this and you've got graduates coming out of it in previous years, it's quite an easy sale to sell when you're trying to get people engaged.
Harry, thanks for your time and all the best with the sale.
Thanks very much, gents.
The following segment is brought to you by Darley. We've talked about emerging stallions. Now let me throw another name into the mix, Native Trail. Breeders couldn't stop calling him the best-looking stallion on the Darley roster. And that's on top of him being a champion 2-year-old and a classic winner at 3. The scary part? His foals are just as sharp-looking as he is. Like Too Darn Hot all over again, but with his own twist. Native Trail has the looks, the race record, and now the foals to back it up. He's staring you right in the face. Native Trail, standing at Darley Kelvin side for $27,500, including GST. And joining us now on Straight Talk is Shane McGrath, bloodstock agent, breeder and successful owner who has worked with some of the biggest names in the thoroughbred industry. Shane has a burgeoning partnership with trainer Clinton McDonald, while it's also involved sourcing and offering horses through the upcoming ready-to-race sale at Inglis. Shane, thanks for joining us on Straight Talk.
No, thanks for finally having me. I've been watching on from afar, and I'm glad to be on board. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, Shane, you've played almost every role in the Australian bloodstock market over the years. Be it vendor, buyer, all the different places you can be. Talk to us about this sort of current strategy. You've been obviously sourcing horses through yearling sales and developing through and getting them ready to go through the breeze up sales. So how did that evolve? And what do you see as the sort of I guess the key option or the key upside for you and what you're doing?
Yeah, I guess I've watched the sort of European and American markets for quite a while, and they've got a really good handle on the 2-year-old in training sale. And it's not a secondary market for them. It's very much a primary market. And I've been really encouraged with what Sebastian and his team have done with the Inglis Ready to Race series. I think they've got the model right. Obviously, we know how successful NZB have things going in New Zealand. We've supported that, and we've had a lot of luck. And we're really encouraged with what's happening. And we had a great result with our first offering last year. And I've got a nice bunch of horses again for this year. I was chatting to Clinton actually during the week, and it's funny what you sort of determine what is a ready to run horse, what's the market looking for, and that's a challenge in itself. But it's definitely very much a domestic market as well as an international market, and I think we've got horses for both markets there.
Jane, what have you learned from the Northern Hemisphere markets where they are more accepted, I guess, the breeze up sales to and the vendors, the importance of the faith in the vendors, which plays down here as well?
Exactly. Yeah, I suppose that from my perspective, to only really comment on sort of the now, the present and things going forward, like that European style of ready to run horse. Those horses, when they're purchased, they're ready to go straight into a training system. You could see just recently there's a number of flagship 2-year-olds have come out of the Tattersalls breeze up sales. So that's probably a determinant factor in the style of horse we try to buy, and also the way we train them, I guess. You think about those horses. We bought horses in April at the Craven sale for some Hong Kong clients. Now those horses had been in work in Ireland at their vendor's place, and the same as everywhere else, basically from Christmas time. So they're broken in, and they're just continually in a training mode and model, and physically it's very good, and mentally as well. They get into a routine. So once they get to their breeze up, those horses, they work over 600 meters. And a lot of people, while it's timed the final furlong, what's known as the gallop out, which is the furlong after the time, that's where people play a lot of credence to, because that's basically how the horse is running on his natural ability, I suppose, unassisted by the jockey. And, we've tried to look at that as well. So the horses that are not just there to run down over 200 meters, it puts a lot of pressure on a young horse physically to try and make them go a little bit faster to try and be acceptable to the clock, and also mentally. I want a horse that our own horses, if they don't meet the market and we like them and I bring them home, I want to have a future with them. but also for, trainers, if they want to buy them, I want to have something that even in this prep that they can go and do something with them. And obviously the Hong Kong market is a huge market for every vendor that's attending the Inglis Ready to Race sale. And temperament is so important there. So I don't want a horse that's fried or that's had too much pressure on them mentally early in their preparation.
It's sort of the combined skill set between you and Clinton. Obviously, Clinton does a fair bit of work with the horses, and you source the horses and work through them. How does that work? I mean, do you sort of feel like your skill sets are quite complementary in that regard, Shane?
Yeah, I find with myself and Clinton, we work really well insofar as the style of horse that we both like, and it's rarely that we would sort of look at one that neither of us like. We like looking at horses together. I like having someone to bounce an opinion off. You look at a lot of horses at the sales, and you can get distracted, or you sort of think, oh, is he as nice as I think he is? And invariably, when I turn to Clinton, we both have the same sort of nod. And I find at the end of the day, when we look back, horses that haven't quite made the grade, just for our reason, there's nothing wrong with the horses, just for our what we're looking for. Generally, the list is the same. Clinton's obviously got a busy stable in Cranbourne. He's a bit more time precious than I am, so I can put a bit more time into the early listing. And I've obviously got our Hong Kong company that we have to cater for as well. So it does work in hand, because from the Hong Kong perspective, horses that we've raced in Australia, we've had a lot of success. So, it's very much works well under the one umbrella with different tangents to it.
And what do you think buyers are looking for in a breeze up horse when, in a couple of weeks you'll be parading them around there? They will have been in the paddock for maybe, 10 days or so. There's confirmation, but is it the weight, how much weight those horses might have put back on? What do the buyers look for, or what do you look for in traits? Horses like that?
I think, a lot of people traditionally would have thought that it was all determined by the time they ran down. And the feedback I'm getting from my Hong Kong clients and people that, source horses through me, they're very much looking at the action of the horse, how he breathes down, how much pressure he was under. They're well attuned. I mean, most of the people that are buying ready to run horses, they're watching track work every day. So they know how a horse is moving, how he's coping with it. Is he suiting the ground? Is he a high climbing action? Is he stretching out? How did he run through the line? And all those things. There's not a lot of places to hide when they do come down. Our horses, as I said, there's a lot of development left with them. So a couple of hours might have run down a little bit green insofar as they were, that maybe didn't run as through as you require to be breaking the clock. But I thought they all showed a nice action. Physically, some of mine, I specifically bought horses that were not your typical breeze up horse. I have horses there that ran down in 11.4, 11.5 with beautiful big actions that I think will sell equally as well as any horse that was running, sub 11, because they had that running action that people like, and they've got plenty of size and plenty of scope.
Is there? I mean, the Asian market so well, Shane. You spent a lot of time working within Hong Kong and around those places. I mean, is there a different in terms of the type of horses that the Asian market looks at compared to maybe what the domestic market would look like, or is there a significant difference there, or they all look at the same horses? Do you feel?
I think so. I mean, it's very much twofold. When I source horses in Europe for Hong Kong clients, they very much want sort of the mile types out of Europe. So when they want sprinters, they're happy to look to the Australian market, which is great for us. So you need a certain style of horse that suits that. But horses carry a little bit more weight in Hong Kong, so the market is more in tune there. The horse a little bit more size and a little bit more presence, I guess. They look that they can carry the weight, and that's something that I guess once they're weighed and measured, you can determine that as well. But a lot goes in, with a horse that fills the eye, and people that are looking for a Hong Kong Derby style horse. I mean, it's a similar style of horse all over the world that's running in a Derby, isn't it? It's got size and plenty of strength and scope to them. Whereas our sprinters, they're a little bit more short coupled, so they have a bit more muscle on them. And they're the horses, if you're bringing a sprinting style horse that are ready to run, they want to be shown that they're buzzing down pretty quick, because they got that, the short muscle mass, the twitch fibers that's going to be running, sub 11 times. People look at my draft there, the Tiger in Malay, that he ran down in 10:88, but physically he ran down like he should. He's just a real powerful up and go sprinter that, to want to use the famed terminology that everyone loves now, he's a pre-Christmas 2-year-old, and we're not seeing as many pre-Christmas 2-year-olds anyway, so he's almost becoming unique in our market as opposed to, what was the norm 10, 15 years ago.
And with your diverse range of clients as well, will you be looking to buy at the 3 sales, Magic Millions and Inglis and New Zealand, the next sort of 6 to 8 weeks?
I think so. Yeah, we bought 2 years ago. We bought 6 horses in New Zealand. 5 of those have came out in one, so we've had a good shopping there. One thing we found, no matter what, with the New Zealand horses, it was just in our experience, by the time they got back through into the Cranbourne system, they were given a chance to get their heads together. It was generally a 12-month process to when they were either ready to race or ready to market again for what we were looking to do. So, that's something that you need to factor in. And generally, the New Zealand style of horse is that more, bigger scope, your lady maturing type. So, you factor that into your business model when you're purchasing. And obviously, it's the cost of bringing them back as well. Sydney has been a good shopping ground for us. I bought a beautiful Perencanto at the Ready to Race sale last year from Sean Nolan. He's been named Trapper John. And he actually looked like, originally we were targeting Hong Kong with him. And Clinton feels like he's a proper autumn 3-year-old. We were thinking about going to the Carbine Club with him, and then we just said we'd just give him a break and have him ready for the autumn. So in terms of shopping, I try and get around and look from a buyer's perspective. I want to see where there's value, and then from a vendor's perspective, I want to have a look at the competition and see what are the other headline horses there, because I feel that I've got a couple of horses there that will. I think they will be in the higher end of the sale, and it's always good to know what's comparable.
Yeah, I was going to say that obviously if you're Rathshean Bloodstock, you've got 14 horses. Have you got a couple of favourites there, Shane, that are sort of, you definitely sort of have put their hand up as ones you'd probably expect to be up near the top end?
Yeah, what we found, look, we entered 14, and it's just an opportunity to put them through kindergarten, I guess, to see what's what do we feel is suitable to a ready to run, ready to race sale, as Sebastian has correctly informed me it's now called, not ready to run, ready to race. So there's a few of those that were a little bit immature, and we just felt that they were better off having a bit of time. So we, the horses that we're bringing, I think they're clean. They're going to vet clean. They've galloped clean. They're good types. I have a couple of headline horses there. I've got a lot of time for the Tornado out of Gig. He breeds down in really good fashion. My Exceeding Excel out of Chantra. He's as nice a horse as going to be at the sale. He was, when he breeds, he ran down, I think he was 11-3, but it was funny over Wangaratta. Just as he was getting ready to go, there was a really bad headwind. And he probably first time at Wangaratta into a headwind. But he still came down like a professional 11-3. So I'm more than happy to hang my hat on the two of those for anyone that's looking for a high end horse for either domestic or international. Our Grunt that we purchased, I mean, that's a horse that's he's going to find a lot of flavour in Hong Kong, and he's an obvious horse for that market. And then we bought a couple of horses that we wouldn't have probably looked for in previous years. There's a Hanseatic there, and there's a Dirty Work and Brave Smash. Big, strong, good-looking horses. They're going to be beautiful 3-year-olds. And not everyone that goes shopping for a Hong Kong horse wants to spend $500,000. And I think we'll find, the chat is that there's going to be a lot of people looking for horses in the upcoming sale in Sydney. We're speaking to Sebastian and James Price, and I think you got to be able to cater for every market there. And we also sourced the Written Tycoon filly in Melbourne that Clinton and I, we adored that filly, and we said, well, let's put her into the ready to run sale. She ran down a good time. He's pretty high on the filly, and it'll be interesting to see how she's received.
Of course, last year, Shane, there was a deep field colt that Clinton was just enamoured with and couldn't let him go, and he had to stump up. It paid $750,000, and at the moment looks like an inspired purchase. Of course, his name's Rosberg. Can you talk us through him?
So we found Rosberg at Newgate's Easter draft, and I purchased him with a couple of partners to go into the ready to run market. I mean, he was bought to trade, bought to sell. Obviously, it's on a deep field. Big, strong, good-looking horse with a really good action to him. It was everything I look for in a yearling, and we paid a bit of money for him. You know, I knew it was when I was putting my share in. I knew I was dipping into the piggy bank. That's for sure. But from the moment Clinton got him, I'll tell you. Actually, he said at the sales he liked him, but if we sent him out to Matt Vellis to get broken in, and Matt pulled him out of the box, and Clinton said, "Geez, what's this?" And that's the moment that Clinton said, "You know, I like this horse," and all the way through, he just kept doing everything right. Had a really good break, and once he came into work, every rider that rode him wanted to tell me how nice this deep field was. And we had a pretty strong draft last year, if you remember. We've had a couple of nice horses come out of it, but obviously Rosberg's the flagship horse. I had a good chat leading into the sale as to, you know what, the best way to go about the sale. And I had a good chat to Sebastian. I thought, look, you know, he's got to be worth as you know, he's worth more than what I paid for him, because I know he's breezed up in good time, and he's a fashionable horse. So, you know, most people who were serious in the horse knew what the reserve was on the horse going into the ring, and you know, you stood back and just let things happen. And you know, Clinton had to be strong. He's got some of his really strong owners in behind the horse. It's great for them, and he franked it at Mooney Valley, and he's going into the heading to the Coolmore via the Dane Hill. And obviously we've stayed in the horse as well, which, yeah, I think that's part and parcel of the game now. Which if you've got a big colt that's considered a stallion prospect. You know, it's you know, whether you're an Arrowfield or a Newgate or a Coolmore or whatever else, it's not unusual for the vendors to, if they like. I mean, I love the horse as a yearling. I love them at the breeze up sale. So we're fortunate to be part of the journey, and he's a great flagship horse for the draft and the brand and for everything that myself and Clinton are trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, if obviously there's an expectation there that he's top level. Debusan Stakes Company wins, comes out to the Danehill on the weekend, and is headed towards the Coolmore. I mean, you're a trader, Shane. You sell horses for a living. What would it take to pry this guy away from the ownership group, do you think?
Well, there's Dennis Alexandros and Terry Board and Todd Hartley and those guys. They waited for a horse like this all their lives, to be honest. And they're in very fortunate positions in their lives financially. I'm a long way from that financially myself, I could promise you. But I think you know, the Danehill will tell everybody else probably, is he as good as what we think he is? We believe he is. You know, people ask me about our draft. Oh, is there another Rosberg there? Well, you know, you ask Darley, is there another Bivouac, or what's he called? Bivouac? Is there?
Bywak, yeah.
Like, have they got another one of those? Like Clinton hasn't seen a horse like Rosberg since Weekend Hustler, and that's 20 years ago. So it's very, very hard to get a horse like this. And it's nerve-wracking because you're going in, you want to, there's almost expectation now. It's a bit like you're having if you have a good bet and an even money shot, you're pretty happy you've got your money back, you know, and then the joy of winning. I don't gamble anymore, but I'm trying to give you an analogy. Like, we were going there full of confidence. We genuinely believe he's the best horse that any of us have had anything to do with. And I've been fortunate to be involved in some really good horses. So it sounds a bit silly saying that about a horse that's a stakes winner. But you know, hopefully after the Coolmore, I won't sound so silly.
Shane, good luck on the weekend with Rosberg and your draft in a couple of weeks. The straight will be up there, of course, and look forward to seeing you. And yeah, thanks very much for your time.
No problem, gents. Great to chat and have a good weekend. And we've got a 2-year-old running in Melbourne as well in the Marathon. So if you're looking to have a vet, have something to place on her, all up into Rosberg, and you can thank me on Sunday.
Yeah, Streisand, quick word on her. What's her backstory?
Good filly. She was early. I think she was lot 4 in Melbourne. Magnus filly, but she was all Zoo Star. Big loose walking filly with a great hind quarter. We adored her. Bought her on spec. And we've got a big ownership group in her. My daughter Ava's, that's her first horse, and Darcy, who you know, he's heavily involved down with Clinton. They're part of the ownership. She's coming in soft. Like, she had a gallop at home. She had a 650 jump out. That was this filly's pretty nice. And then she went and had a trial, and Clinton just said, look, you know, this filly keeps coming. She's natural. He doesn't like to overwork those 2-year-olds. They've got to be there for him. And she's there. We're very happy with her at Flemington. And Ben Mellon galloped her on Tuesday, and it was a really, really good bit of work on Tuesday. I thought, she's not exposed on trial for him. I thought, she'd open up 15 or 20 to 1. I see she's opened up sort of $8, which that's a bit short for anything in that in the unknown. But really, I think she's a good filly, and I'm hoping on Saturday there's plenty of people cheering.
Well, best of luck with that. Given Clinton's reputation for a bit of a plunge, I don't blame the bookies for being a little bit cautious about his starter from his stage.
He'll have them nervous because he's got Star Patrol. He said he's never been going better. So if the all up comes up, I'll be in looking out on Sunday morning. I can promise you.
Terrific, Shane. All the best on the weekend and best over the next few weeks.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, great conversation there with Shane around about his own stallion aspirations himself with Rosberg. Geez, the confidence is high within that stable at the moment. He mentioned Baywak, and I just wanted to briefly touch on that. A stallion making result and a stallion making race last week with that horse dominating the Golden Rose. You can see that, all the vision and the data and the track record and everything that comes out of that race and that win for Baywak being very much front and centre as him as a stallion, whether it's next year or the year after, Tim. He looks like an absolutely ideal prospect for that for Darley going forward, doesn't he?
Sustained speed, early speed, depends who you talk to. Some say that tactical speed is, inheritable, and you win so many races going forward, and he just being able to sustain that, particularly over 1400, phenomenal performance, and certainly has a home at stud at Darley at some point, whether they, like Bivouac, his sire, it was important for him, and he seemed to get better and better with age at 4, and so there's no reason why Baywak can't do the same, and just interesting where they go to with him from here, certainly this spring, and probably take on older horses in the autumn.
Yeah, fascinating. And the win was probably reminiscent of what his sire did, Bivouac did in one of his Group 1 wins. He just dominated races and powerful speed, and that Exceed Excel influence is extraordinary. Obviously, his grandsire, but Exceed Excel was also the dam sire of the second and third horse in that race, Woden and Tempted. So, that sets up Darley very well in terms of their bloodlines moving forward. Quick touch, Tim, on a story that you covered off about Inglis and their Everest lot. Obviously, they put their hand up for Skybird last week. That lasted about 24 hours because Skybird unfortunately ran last on the Manicato and he won't be up for the Everest, so they've got to find another horse. There are still plenty of good candidates out there and emerging, and we've seen before that in the last couple of weeks before the Everest, you can pick up a possible winner moving forward.
Well, you get and I did speak to Sebastian Hutch, and he was fully supportive of Skybird, and they would have backed Mitch Friedman in to have the mare right, but he decided you just won't have the time to get her right, and she did have to trial beforehand, so they officially ruled her out on Wednesday. But the upside, I guess, is the Inglis will be able to find a horse, hopefully, that's in form, running well at the right time, 2 weeks out from the race. They'll be watching, Flemington with the Gilguy, the Dane Hill, and then, of course, the Premier in Sydney. So there'll be enough options. Of course, Giga Kick won the 2022 Everest off very lightly, raced sort of early in his career and won the Dane Hill, and some people thought, oh, will that stand up? And he won at 25 to 1 for James Tarrant Syndicate. So, I think Inglis will be in a reasonable place to find an informed horse, and they've been here before with Snap Dancer pulling out. Same year, 2022, I think it was, and got Private Eye and ran second to Giga Kick. So, I don't think they're panicking, certainly.
Yeah, and I think probably slot holders have held off traditionally because it makes more sense for them to do so, Tim, because, you get better options later on. There are plenty of options out there, and sprinting horses, certainly you need them to be in form. You want them to be up there and showing what they can do best, and, it's you want to pick a horse that can be up and about. Moving on now, Tim, to wagering, the US market. I wanted to mention this one because there was a significant moment this week when the share prices of both DraftKings and Flutter, who are the two biggest players in the American market, they control about 80% of the American market, crashed by 10% in one day. Now, we're not a share market podcast. We're a racing podcast, a wagering podcast, but that was significant for the fact that I think it was $8 billion wiped combined off their value. Like, these companies are massive companies, so it takes a lot to. So what happened? Well, what happened was effectively Kelce, who's been this prediction markets operator, and I'll explain in a minute what the difference is between the prediction market and the sports bookmaker. But they started offering same game parlays, or what we'd call same game multis here in Australia through their NFL product. It was enough to cause a bit of an earthquake through the US market. All of a sudden, that the dominance that these bookmakers have held since PASPA was decision was handed down in 2018 has suddenly opened up this concept that this idea of a sportsbook as a sportsbook is very different now, because why Kelce as a prediction market is actually a financial product which is regulated federally. What that means is that they can operate in states where FanDuel, where Flutter and DraftKings can't. So it also enables them to grow their product in a different way. They've also done a key partnership with Robinhood, who are the trading platform, which is quite ubiquitous in America as well. So therefore, you can trade shares at one point and effectively place bets on sports results on another. It is completely a game changer in America. And I think this will be a significant story over the next 12 months. These prediction markets, unless there is legislative change or some sort of court ruling or whatever to change them, will continue to take market share because people are seeing the value of them, and they are, they're attracting the same people that are trading crypto, who are trading on platforms like Robinhood through their shares, and now the retail traders then onto what we would see as sports betting, but what they see as financial transactions. So it's a really interesting one. I don't know what application it has to Australia, Tim, but it's certainly, I know it caught your eye as well, but it certainly caught my eye that this could be a significant change in the way that global wagering sort of set up.
Well, yeah, I'm not across the regulations exactly, and whether, maybe it goes back to that High Court case from 2012 and before that with Betfair, probably not arguing their case strongly that they weren't a bookmaker. And so whether there's the opportunity for the Australian laws for something like that to happen, I'm not sure. I think it's probably more regulated here to avoid that from, if you're a corporate bookmaker point of view. But it will be certainly interesting in how much, that market grows, and, the share traders of the market's spoken, hasn't it? That, how big they expect it to get and impact the more traditional corporate bookmakers.
Yeah, we call them traditional corporate bookmakers. They've only really been in existence for 6 years, but things change quickly in this industry, Tim, and they've changed quickly for Entain as well, who we noted. Well, obviously, they're on this Austrac sort of question at the moment, what's going on with that, and we'll find out more about that in the coming months. But in New Zealand, they've opted to opt out of their racing club. They've only set it up 12 months ago, and obviously they opted out of the Ladbrokes Racing Club in Australia. In the last 6 months, they're going to sell down their horses, so a significant moment for Entain, and they're very much focused on selling bets and getting their compliance and everything in order to make sure that they can get to this Austrac issue. So interesting point for them. The other one I just want to mention from a wagering perspective, I had a story there during the week. State governments banked more than $1.1 billion in direct revenue from the wagering industry in 23 and 24. The wagering industry being, obviously, racing and sports betting effectively. Australia's overall gambling expenditure, this is from the Australian Gambling Statistics, reached over $32 billion in the 23-24 year. These stats are a year behind because of the way they're compiled. That's a record. Wagering made up $8.4 billion of that, which is interesting. But employee consumption tax levied by state and territory governments continued to provide a windfall. $1.1 billion, as I said, out of that $8.4 billion of expenditure coming back to state governments. They're making a good amount of money. Putting that in context, though, however, $9.4 billion is what state and territory governments got out of gambling, Tim. 5.4 billion of that, so do a bit of rough maths on that, it's probably 65%, is coming from gaming machines, i.e. pokies. So it's fascinating from my perspective. $200 billion was turned over on pokies in Australia in the past, in that 12-month period. Now, there's a lot of discussion about harm minimisation and the challenges for the wagering industry, and we are a strong supporter of moving towards a model of much more detailed responsible gambling responsibilities. But it seems to be like, again, pokies and there's gaming machines and casinos are still dominating despite the fact that state governments are getting more money.
I can't add too much, but that's they have, and you can argue both sides whether wagering and sports betting and racing needs to differentiate themselves, certainly to governments and lobbyists. We're seeing what's happening in the UK at the moment with the government wanting to, or potentially evening up gambling taxes, and potentially that would, would harm racing turnover, and I'm sure the same would happen here if that was brought in. So I guess it's up to regulators and those that can lobby to government to point out the differences between gaming and gambling and wagering, I guess, or gaming and wagering.
Yeah, and we're seeing
They
that
are
in those,
distinct.
and those numbers as well. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by Inglis and Darley, our sponsors. Don't forget to give us a rating wherever you're listening to our podcast, and be sure to subscribe. Send us an email at editor@thestraight.com.au. Happy to take your feedback or any questions you may have. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you again next week.